Well, welcome to this edition of Family Hour. I'm hoping that I have our program here. Let's just see if we have the guys up. We're having a tough time of bringing the. Oh, here we are. Okay, good. I'm delighted now. We have the show up. It's always a challenge because I have a monitor here that has what's on the camera, but it doesn't say what's being streamed through StreamYard for the live broadcast of the program. But right. I can see now to my right, I have these two handsome devils, Captain Kirk and Kevin. Kevin, nice video presentation that you did.
Thank you.
For those who don't know yet, we have launched the Yada Yahowah group here on Facebook. We decided that since Facebook had a strict limit of 5,000 friends, and who would have thought we'd have reached that at this point, but we're bumping up to it. And so we've taken the Facebook site to what's called Professional, which gives us that number of friends, but an infinite number of potential followers, which will have more people be able to participate. But the ultimate way to reach a larger audience on Facebook is via a group. And so we started just 2 days ago, the group on Yada Yahowah and on Facebook, and I think we're up close to 100 participants. So that's a good start from nothing just a day ago. And what we found is that many members of the covenant who have come to know Yahweh and be part of his covenant family from all around the world have a different yet somewhat similar journey. Everybody was issued an invitation, if you will, from Yahweh, a way that God introduced himself to those who were already questioning or had moved away from religion. Kirk, you have a very interesting story. And so what we found is that a number of people wrote their kind of testimonial of who they are, where they have been, how they found Yahweh, and began this journey in the covenant family, and what they are doing at this time. And gosh, it was when I went there this morning, there were just so many of them, it was even hard to respond to everybody.
Right.
And it was wonderful. And then someone, I think it was you, Kevin, suggested that we take as many of these as possible and turn them into 10-minute video presentations. Because if the individual will take their cell phone and record themselves making this presentation, we can do wonders in terms of sharing this with others and invite others into the family, because shared experiences are very appealing to people. They're real. You know, this is where I was. This is what I learned. I did some more investigation, and this is how I've grown since then, and done a lot of checking and verification, and this is where it has led. So that has been probably the best part of the Yada Yahowah group on Facebook. So before we return to the primary message of today, which is the continuation of Chakmah Choter, we're in the preamble to the Sermon on the Mount, where Solomon not only presented his presentation of what this house to Yahweh's name represents, and his dedication to his father and his father's contribution to it. But he is just one statement away now from introducing the Nakri, which is the individual that Yahweh has chosen to call his people home. But before we go there, my wife, Leah, has written another song. Kevin, this may be a partnership. I don't know. I did see the song and listen to it this morning. It is really compelling. It is written on something that I was very unique in addressing. I began this some 15 years ago. And what I said when I opened a series of books called Observations, and they're observations for our time, I was probably 15 years ahead of where humanity has come. But what I said was that hate's a virtue. And that what we need to do as humans, if we're going to be moral, just, compassionate, and loving, is we need to learn what to hate, how to hate, why to hate, and even how to do so. So I gave the examples of we all ought to hate murderers, like the anti-Semite that took the lives of the two embassy workers in Washington D.C. of Israeli embassy workers. Such a lovely couple, and this idiot was so hopped up on progressive Marxist rhetoric that has metastasized into Jew hating and to rage and violence, all based upon demonizing the victims of genocide. I mean, they're so confused, so immoral, so ignorant, so irrational that we ought to hate that kind of thing, and we ought to hate the whole mantra of progressives that have been so responsible for this. As a matter of fact, one of the things that most people don't know is that the myth of Palestine is not just casual. It didn't just somehow emerge on the scene. It has really a very brief history. It was conceived in 133 CE by Hadrian, and he meant it to be a slur, to be nothing more than a way of imposing Rome's viciousness, that it wasn't enough for Rome to crucify hundreds of thousands of Jews and torture them to death. It wasn't enough for Rome to destroy Israel. For the third time that the Romans did this, wasn't enough for them to rob God's people. Hadrian wanted to insult them. He wanted to turn the Temple Mount into a shrine for his own divinity. And as part of his hideous immorality and rage and just disgust, he's the one who came up with the name Philistia, Palestine. And he did it because the only place that name is actually used is in the writings where we are told that the Philistines were invaders, they were foreign invaders, and they were ruthless terrorists. And that they became a formidable enemy for a while of Israel until David subdued them. And then after David subdued them, then they ran afoul of the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Macedonian Greeks, and finally done in at that time. I think there might have been a small regiment of them left over for the Romans to mop up, but they were so ruthless, so disgusting, that they couldn't even be enslaved. And so they were annihilated. So the name only is used as a slur to torment Jews. Well, because the British had been anti-Semites for a long time, they clung to the name. And so the British were the first to revive the name after 133 CE when Hadrian had used it. And the Brits had to know that when they revived the name, that they were doing something that was disgusting, that it was a slur. It's far worse than, to use Palestine is far worse than the N-word that, you never use today. Far worse than that. It's far worse than making your primary go-to verb an F-bomb. That's the level of what Palestine represents. So in the mid-1960s, a Marxist regime in the KGB in Russia met with a Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt with Nasser's blessing. And they took this scummy communist Muslim named Yasser Arafat, and they bequeathed him with a flag that just took the star off of Jordan's flag. And they decided that since they had failed in 2 wars against Israel, 1948, the War of Independence, they got collective Team Islam got their butts kicked by the neophyte Israel. And then in 1967, the combined thrust of all of the Islamic nations once again lost badly to Israel. In fact, the United States hadn't made the Israelis give up territory. Israel would now control all of the Sinai, would actually control Cairo, would control Damascus and almost all of Syria. as well as much of Lebanon. What a much better world it would have been. But unfortunately, the United States was belligerent at the time and forced Israel to withdraw. But that's when this myth of Palestine was, this slur was resurrected. And it was resurrected for a single purpose. And that purpose was to perpetrate genocide against Jews and to exterminate Israel. That is the entire purpose of Palestine. So if you say free Palestine, what you're saying is, I want to commit an act of anti-Semitism that is a slur against the Jewish people, and I want to annihilate them and eradicate Israel from the face of the earth. That is what Palestine means. That's all Palestine means. It has nothing beyond that. And if you don't hate that, because you're ignorant of it, because you're immoral, because you're a progressive, because you're a Muslim, then this song that Leah wrote is for you. Because any doctrine that would motivate people to scream free Palestine and then murder two beautiful Jewish, a man and a woman, to death because he is completely indoctrinated with Jewish hatred. In his case, the United Nations put out this farce that some 12,000 Jewish babies were about to die because Israel was perpetrating genocide. And it was a complete farce. They knew it was a farce. They've even retracted it since. But didn't stop progressives as the pimps of Islam from being enraged. And it led to blood on our streets. Now, that's why I said hate is a virtue. You need to hate these kinds of things and the doctrines that promote them. And you hate them not with bullets. You don't stoop to their level. You don't hate them with the knives. You don't hate them with fists or bombs. You hate them with words. You do what I have just done. You use words to expose the truth so that it embarrasses, so that it undermines those doctrines and institutions, political platitudes and religious myths that torment God's people. So, Leah, I think you're mic'd up. What is it that you would like to introduce and tell us about your song? Leah, we're not hearing a word from you.
Hate is a virtue. I learned it from you. Crude counterfeits like Jesus or Jesus or whatever his name is. An Arabian warlord came along, singing his own tune. You have heard it before, but I'm Muhammad now. Say, hey, 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 Mo, just who the hell you think you are? Oh, love can be blinding, and lies can be binding. On every street corner, in the midst of her is the whore. Religion, they bow to her and clasp hands with Babel. Hate shows the way, knowledge comes into play. Hey, 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 that lie the rabbis tell cannot save. Save yourself some coin, don't trash your mind with lies. Lie, 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 lie. Oh, they do lies. Oh, love can be blinding, and lies can be binding. On every street corner, in the midst of her is the whore. Religion, they bow to her and clasp hands with Babel. To protect what's inside your liver and mind, don't trash it with lies like a rabbi does, or some guy screaming Allahu Akbar while stabbing a guy. Oh, love can be blinding, and lies can be binding. On every street corner, in the midst of her is the whore. Religion, they bow to her and clasp hands with Babel. So I'll rage against wrongs, against crowds of warped minds, breaking worshiping idols and stomping snakes, 'cause in the end, babe, hate is a virtue. Remember the name you lost in the sand. Our Elohim is Yahowah, and He's my friend. You should know of secrets you kept while I held your hand tightly. I felt the betrayal's depth. You danced with a thief in a tune full of lies. But my heart turned to stone with a jealousy bite. Oh, love can be blinding. In shadows we hide, but hate shows the way to protect what's inside. I'll rage against wrongs, 'cause in the end, babe, hate is a virtue.
Wow.
There has been a lot to hate over the years. The most hateful event of modern time, of course, is the Holocaust, where European Christians systematically murdered 6 million Jews. And it was European Christians. Let's just not isolate it to the Nazis, because in the Ukraine and Poland and France and Greece, no matter where you went, Jews were annihilated. Jewish populations in some countries were diminished by 90%. Genuine, authentic genocide. But I can't change that. There was, not in that league, because there's nothing ever in the human history that has been as bad as what Christian Europe did to Jews as a result, really, of the New Testament. The New Testament's a hideously destructive and damning book, which is why Leah featured so many symbols of Christendom in that movie, supporting the song, because Christianity has created the climate by demonizing and dehumanizing Jews throughout the Christian New Testament, such that Europeans felt that they were justified in mass murder and genocide. But gentlemen, we can't do anything to stop that now. It's already happened. And while there are terrible calamities in the world, the great suffering in the Sudan, for example, I have no ability to influence that at all. What I can do, and what I'm committed to doing, is trying to protect God's people, Israel. And the most sinister thing that is happening today is that God's people are being victim shamed. The victims of the most savage act since the Holocaust. And in fact, in terms of just raw savagery, the amount of women that were gang raped to the point that they fractured their hips, women who had to watch as their unborn child was cut out of their abdomen, tortured, tormented. Women that after being raped, they cut off their breasts and played with them as if they were balls by these Muslims. Burnt little babies, many of them alive. Cut off, mutilated fingers and toes. I want you to know what they did, progressives, because you are repulsive. I want you to know what they did, Macron and Starmer, because of what you're doing, selling out Israel because you've been bribed by Saudi Arabia. I want you to know, Donald Trump, what it is that is going to stain your soul, because this is what they did on that day. They committed acts of mass gang rape and mutilations. They abducted even grandmothers, Holocaust victims, little babies, and then they murdered them with their own hands. And they systematically, as an entire community, tortured them and starved them and abused them and spit upon them. And then committed acts of not only mass murder, but of torture while murdering, all while screaming Allahu Akbar and committing to getting their crime, announcing that they did it, confessing to this crime.
Gleefully.
Yeah, celebrating it like it was a good thing to torment and kill Jews. Now, if you don't hate that, you don't have a conscience. And if you're going to condemn Jews for trying to hold those who did this accountable to their grandmothers and to their daughters and to their children, then you have a broken conscience. You should be ashamed. And that would include almost all progressives and Marxists in this world. And of course, almost all Muslims. You are disgusting. And yes, you ought to be hated. You ought to be despised. But you ought to be hated and despised with words, with your horrendous acts exposed with words, just as I'm doing. And so this song celebrates something that humanity has lost. And we've lost it largely because of progressive institutions that have robbed people of good judgment. I don't think there's a young person under 25 in America or Europe that's capable of thinking. That's not true. There are some. But it's such a small percentage because of what academia has done to indoctrinate them. You're not smart enough in Israel to recognize that your enemy is not Hamas. It's not Hezbollah. It's not Iran. They just are symptoms of this enemy. It's not Islamic Jihad. It's not the Islamic State. It's not Al-Qaeda. It's Islam. Islam is a declaration of war on all mankind. When Muhammad stumbled into Yathrib, when he had lost all of his followers because of his foolishness and his winged donkey ride to the Temple Mount to meet in the temple that didn't even exist at the time, and to brag that he went to visit Allah by first traveling through hell, where he saw nothing but women hanging from their breasts by meat hooks. And then he belted out the satanic verses, admitting that all of Allah's witnesses, all of Allah's messengers speak for Satan. And he lost the never-ending argument. He accepted the indulgence, the idolatrous indulgence, where he admitted that Allah was just one of many gods and goddesses, and the Kaaba even added them to the Quran. He was laughed out of Kaabaville in shame. And he stumbled into Yathrib, which was a Jewish community. There were 30,000 Jewish farmers in Yathrib. 30,000 of them. Within 5 years, there would be none. Muhammad plundered them, robbed them, sold their children into slavery, raped their women, and cut off the men's heads. This is the disgusting truth about Islam. Allah is an anti-Semite. And the Quran itself is nothing more than a cobbled together group of bastardized Jewish Talmud readings, all which Muhammad bought from rabbis and claimed that Allah gave him. And then when the rabbis mocked him for taking their stories, twisting them to the point that they were laughable, and claiming that Allah gave him what they sold him, the psychopath turned on the Jews and slaughtered them all. Now, if you don't know that, shame on you, Israel, because you're being tormented by them. You're being raped and robbed and abducted and tortured by them. Shame on you for not knowing that your enemy is Islam. And shame on the world for not despising the Quran, Muhammad, who was a pedophile, who was a rapist, who was a mass murderer. Shame on you for not knowing it. Shame on you for not despising it. Shame on you for not knowing that the Christian New Testament is responsible for the Holocaust and that it demeans and dehumanizes Jews. Shame on you for not knowing it. It's obvious. It's undeniable. But if you don't know that these are things you ought to despise because of the great harm they do, in the first 100 years of the Islamic experience, 200 million people, 1/3 of the Earth's population at the time, was raped, robbed, enslaved, and murdered by the first Muslims. If you don't know that, why not? And why would you tolerate and excuse a doctrine that deadly, that subjugates women so that they have to walk around in tents and they have no rights, that raises their children to be suicide bombers gleefully? If you don't know that you should hate that, if you don't know that Paul lied about everything, every time he even quoted from the Torah and prophets, he misappropriated the statement and misrepresented it, so his version of it was the opposite of what God actually said. And he lured billions of people to their spiritual death, death of their souls, because of this fraud. And he robbed Jews of everything, stealing their birthright, stealing the promises that God had given them, even stealing their Messiah. Now, if you don't despise that, then you aren't moral. So that's why I wrote 15 years ago. For what we have witnessed these past days, what we're going to witness going forward over these next few days, that hate is a virtue. To be moral, to be just, to be fair, to be compassionate, to be loving, you must know what to hate, why to hate, and how to hate. Now, the example I'm following is Yahowah's. Pretty good example to follow. He just happens to be God. And he sent me here to talk to you because he wants you to listen to what I have to say and follow the example I'm setting for you. The world is in a mess because, well, take an example of Israel. Your politicians, your media, your rabbis, particularly your progressives, speak of Palestinians as if you don't know that it is a slur, that is a call to exterminate Jews. And that's all it represents. That's all it ever has represented. Why don't you know these things? Why don't you speak out against these things? Why don't you recognize that those 2 scars on your Temple Mount inspire terrorism? Your abduction, your abuse. Why don't you have the good sense to tear them down? Well, that's why I wrote Hate's a Virtue. And I brought the topic back up not too long ago, and a place that I also think needs to be despised. It's not just progressives that should be despised, not just Muslims, for what they have done to God's people, for them taking the victims of genocide and accusing them falsely of it, and demeaning and dehumanizing them, trying to rob them of a state, a place to live. So they're back to the conditions of the Holocaust, where you can have your way with them because they've got no place else to go. So Muslims and your progressive pimps, you're despicable. Donald Trump and the MAGAs for betraying Israel. Same is true for you. But I've got something else that is a beef. X. X is the place where hatred of Jews festers. It is the place where the progressive that murdered the 2 Jewish embassy workers posted his mantra just before killing Jews. It's the place where the Marxist organization that he had belonged to that very day promoted hatred of Jews in Israel. It's the place where there are posters that have hundreds of thousands of followers that are saying that this was a wonderful thing that he did in killing those Jews. It's a place where almost all of the largest accounts are anti-Semitic and spewing nothing but lies against God's people. Now, this is something we can make a difference. And it is incumbent upon us. I said in a shows quite some time ago when we had a group that was claiming that Shabbat was their harvest, and I said, no, it's not. If you are not walking with Israel, if you don't have Israel's back, if your primary concern isn't God's people, then you're not participating in any one of the mikra. They aren't for you. They're all to bring God's people home, and those who walk with and sojourn and support and care about and defend God's people. Now I want to have one other bow. I have mentioned that Christianity, because of its anti-Semitic New Testament, and Islam because it is a death cult beginning with Jews, but it's a death cult that aims to perpetrate genocide on all humankind. The 8th surah says that all Muslims must die killing for Allah. No one left. And I've singled out progressives as being the gas that has been poured on top of these fires. And we also have called out X for being the place that promotes them. X is complicit now in the murder of Jews and the elimination of Israel. It has no conscience. But there is another foe of Israel, and it was throughout that song that my wife produced, and that was rabbis. You may not know this, Israel, but rabbis created Judaism by robbing you of your Messiah, the Son of God, the Savior, as well as of Yahweh's name. You were disassociated from Yahweh because of their purposeful malfeasance. They know God's name. They just erased it from your life. They know the Messiah. He's Dod. They know that he is the Son of God, but they deny it. They know that all of the prophets and the Mizmor are written to tell us that Dod came in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, to fulfill Chakmah, and that he fulfilled Chakmah, Pesach, as the Passover lamb by having Romans crucify him, and he wrote about crucifixion 1,000 years before he endured it and 700 years before crucifixion even existed. And he told Daniel the exact day that he would do so, 700 years in advance. And rabbis robbed you of all of this, the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, eternal life, perfection, and adoption into God's family. They stole this from you by foisting their own false Messiah, Bar Kokhba, the son of a star, from which you get that six-pointed star that you rally around. They robbed you of your soul. But they did more than that. Paul was a rabbi. He was trained by rabbis, and only because of his rabbinical attitude that man's words are better than God's words, and his knowledge of the prophets, that he could pilfer verses that had some commonality with a few words, even knowing they said exactly the opposite of what he wanted to say. The skill to do that, the cleverness to do that, is all through his rabbinical teaching. He's actually the first person to ever use the term rabbi to describe himself. And so it was rabbis that are responsible for the first 14 letters in the Christian New Testament, and the gospel according to Paul, which is Mark, the gospel according to Paul redo, which is Luke, and the book of Paul's life, which is Acts. All of that is a direct result of rabbinical malfeasance, where Paul created and deliberately did this through identity theft, a crude counterfeit of David, the actual Messiah, the Son of God, our Savior and the returning King. Rabbis not only enabled him to do it, when he did it, there wasn't a single rabbi that stood up and said, wait a minute, you're playing with fire here. The Messiah, the Son of God, the Savior who came to fulfill Passover, his name is David. He's the returning king. He told us he was going to do it this exact date, but not one of them. They created both of those religions, but they also created Islam. It was rabbis in Yathrib that sold Muhammad Talmud readings. He took some of them wholesale into the Quran, and others he took snippets of them and twisted them to suit his situation, and then claimed they came from Allah. And without that, the Quran is nothing more than a terrorist manifesto. It does not pass as a religion. It only has the veneer of a religion because of what the rabbis did, trying to make a buck. Rabbis not only stole Jewish souls through rabbinical Judaism with their false Messiah and Bar Kokhba, and how Rabbi Akiba foisted this war against Hadrian that caused the diaspora, such that you had to endure the Holocaust. And he's the father of rabbinic Judaism. So there is another villain that we must speak out against if we're going to save and protect God's people. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, progressives, and in addition to that, the MAGAs of Donald Trump, who is now owned and operated by the Saudi royal family. That's where we are. I went on there for quite a while. We're not talking Chakmah Choter here, but this is the beginning of the time of Jacob's troubles. We're only a year away, and it is being set up exactly as the prophet Yeshaya said it would. Well, gentlemen, I'll catch a breath, have a sip of coffee. I'm more than open to you chiming in. I've been pretty strong in my words.
No, perfect.
All right.
Yeah, rightfully so. I mean, that's it's very difficult in today's society to hate and to be strongly against something like that and to call it out, because there is this whole veneer of tolerance and love everything, you know, and tolerate. But when it's wrong, it's wrong. And I think your approach with words is the only approach that works. Because just listening to you speak, just talking about 10-7 again, it gets me angry. And I'm a type of person that I'm a doer. And you have to take a step back and say, well, my doing is using words, not doing something stupid to make a thing worse, you know? How can I be the most productive to help Yehudim, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's my primary motivation, but you need to have both head and heart. You need to know how to connect them and work together to get the desired result. And I want to challenge something you said. It would have been true, Kevin, 10 years ago, that there was this myth that we can't hate, that we need to hate, and that love is all we need. That was 10 years ago. Progressives are now the most hateful people on the planet.
Right.
They're enraged. They're violent in their hate. And Muslims are exceedingly hateful of Jews and of non-Muslims. So what we find is that it's tolerated, in fact, encouraged on X, rewarded on X, to hate God's people, to hate Israel. That's become par for the course. And of course, progressives hate conservatives. And if you look at the MAGAs and see what they have to say, they despise liberals, progressives, and Democrats, Marxists. It's just a hate fest out there now. Hate isn't a panacea. Progressives hate Israel. Muslims hate Israel. MAGAs hate progressives. Progressives hate MAGAs. None of that hate is justified. That's why I said you have to know what to hate and how to hate and why to hate. And what we have now is a hate fest that is completely disjoined from reality. There is no reason to hate Israel.
Right.
There is no reason to shame the victims of October 7th and the Holocaust. But Islam has been doing it for 14 centuries, and progressives now for the last few decades. So you have to know what to hate. And to be in that position, you have to be well educated. You have to know your history. For example, most people are unaware that Palestine exists as a Marxist Muslim ploy to annihilate Israel. That's its only purpose. It was conceived as a slur and terrorist tactic for that purpose alone. And if you don't know that, if you're not moved by that, then shame on you. I mean, you're just ignorant about an issue that is, well, it's going to start World War III. So it's going to cost you, if you're like most people, it's going to cost you your life. That's what ignorance is going to cost you. I hear so many people rant against Russia for invading Ukraine, and they demonize Putin when he's just ignorant. You don't know that the United States started this war 17 years ago, back with George W. Bush, deliberately, purposefully using Ukraine to kill Russians. And the evidence is overwhelming all along the process, and people don't know it. And so they're just completely ignorant of it, and they haven't any idea that the only way to solve this terrible carnage is to stop arming the Ukrainians and to stop the encroachment of NATO. And yet Europeans and Americans want to do just the opposite. It's pathetic. I mean, we're a world of morons. And when a moron hates, bad things happen. The people that need to explore what is wrong and condemn it effectively are the people who are thoughtful, who are well educated. And unfortunately, there's just very few people now that retain the ability to exercise good judgment. Most people have totally dysfunctional consciences. And we're about to witness a Neville Chamberlain moment. The world is about to sacrifice the heart of Israel, just as Neville Chamberlain sacrificed the high ground of Czechoslovakia, to the Nazis of our day, which would be Muslims, on behalf of MBS, who's financing this along with Qatar. And they're not doing it because they care about Palestinians. They cared about Palestinians. They have plenty of land and plenty of money. They would take the so-called Palestinians, the Gazan Muslims, the West Bank Muslims, and they would have given them all the land and all the money and all the housing and everything they could possibly need. But it has nothing to do with them. They despise them. Every place they have gone, they have been, these malcontent Muslims have been destructive. So they know who they are. They don't want them. They don't care for them. But they want them to be destructive as a weapon against Israel because their Quran demonizes Jews. And so this is what they're foisting on the world. And they don't want, trust me, they have no interest in two states. They state of slur against Jews, Palestine, only exists as a weapon because it points right in the heart of Israel, making the country, as the prophet Yeshua said, indefensible, so they can impose Islamic apartheid and genocide from Pakistan to Morocco. All right, let's return to Devarim Ha-Yomim, 2 Chronicles 6:31. Therefore, they will come to respect and revere you. Solomon is the speaker. This is the initial Sermon on the Mount. And he is speaking of Yahweh. They will come to respect and revere you. Well, they haven't now. Jews rejected Yahweh during the Exodus. It got so bad that Moses says, this is an impossible job. I can't do this anymore. I have no chance of success. If we're going to continue like this, you might as well just kill me. And it's amazing, Yahweh agreed with him. And Yahweh gave up on the Jewish people. He went through the paces and brought them to the promised land, but he would not meet with them again. He would not talk directly to them again. But he told Moshe, well, what you said is true. I have a plan and I have people. And he introduced at that time 2 of them. One of them is named God's Beloved. You ever heard of a fellow named God's Beloved?
Yes, indeed. Dude.
And the other one was the friend and supporter of the beloved Dowd. I know him really well too.
Me too.
And he says at a different time, as a part of this journey, they're the ones who are going to speak for me. And so we're going to resolve this problem of a wayward sheep, not through you, Moshe. You're going to go through the paces. We're going to deliver them to the doorstep of the promised land. And then you're retired. I'm going to pursue the final restoration of my people through these 2. This number's 11. It's one of the most powerful, appropriate, pertinent prophecies of our time, and we will share it in due time. And it is finally, because of the work of the final Zeroah, of this Nakri that Solomon is about to introduce, that Yah's people are finally going to get it. And it's probably impassioned pleas like I gave them at the beginning of this program that will cause some Jews to get over themselves. They are the most hard-headed, stubborn, recalcitrant, embittered people on earth. God has literally says, I want nothing to do with you. I'm divorcing you. You are no longer my children. And it's going to take a very, very long time before we resolve that. And it's all about Shub. You're going to have to return to me before I return to you. And because there was not a single Yehud, not a single Yisraelite, through whom Yahweh could work for the period of 2,500 years. He chose a Goy, this observant foreigner, the Nakri. And his job is to get God's people to listen again. That's why I've written these 35 books that sit behind me. Fellas, it's why you're here. It's why we do what we do. And we realize that we are dealing with an audience that was so tough, God himself could not break through your thick skulls. You told him to go away and to shut up. You didn't want to see him or hear from him again. That was really stupid. And then you erased his name. And then you denied his beloved son, Dowd. And you've continued all the while to be religious when God hates religion. So So this is where we are. Their time will come, though, and we're fast approaching it, when there will be a remnant of Yisrael that will come to respect and revere Yahweh. And they will finally, largely because of what God has done through us, they're going to walk in Yahweh's ways all the days that they live from that point forward. Upon the presence of the earth, which will be for 1,000 years on the earth before we are released to explore the universe. And this earth, this land that Adamah, it's a parah, Adamah, bloody red earth that you gave to our fathers. Well, far fewer than 1 in a million have walked in Yahweh's ways, even up to this point. I would be surprised amongst the 8 billion people that inhabit our planet, even with 8 billion smartphones, all of which can access YAHOWAH.com and read every book for free and listen to the hundreds of hours that we now have of the YAHOWAH blog and these programs on their smartphone, on their tablets, on their desktop, on their computers, on their televisions. I'd be surprised if there were 8,000 among 8 billion. And that's 1 in a million. That's what Yahweh wrote in the second statement he etched in stone. He said there would be thousands that would receive the benefits of his covenant by closely examining, carefully considering those conditions. Literally, thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. I think there will be 8,000 by this time next year. And I think there will be another 7,000 by Towrah, 8 years from now. And I'm hoping that there are 700,000 between all of those that Yahweh brings to Yisrael. Kirk, you're going to be riding shotgun on the white spiritual chariot, and Kevin, you're going to be singing the song as you travel the world in 12 hours to bring God's people home. And I'm hoping that there's 700,000 on that day. We'll see. Our job is to convey the message, to do so as intelligently, as accurately, as passionately, as enthusiastically, completely as is possible. I was going to say humanly possible, but that would not describe it, since Yahweh has given his Choter, this individual that is talking to you, this man that is known as the Nakri, something that he has never given anyone in human history. 7 Ruach, 7 spirits. So that he would know what he's talking about, and so that he'd have the conviction to tell you about it. So Moshe and Dod are preeminent examples, but so are men like Shamuel, Yashaya, Yirmiah, Zachariah, Yoel, Malachi, and of course the returning Elia, as are the women, Ruth, Deborah. This, however, of Israelites who finally return and embrace Yahweh, well, that's going to change when the surviving remnant of God's people capitalize upon the Nakri's Towrah sacrifice and the Messiah's Kippurim homecoming to participate in the Sukkah return to the Garden of Eden. Now, this is going to be the last chance to come clean. For many of you, listening to this program will be the last chance. Yeah, time is fleeting. You know, the time of Jacob's troubles, 2 out of every 3 Jews will die, and Goyim around the world, you're not going to fare that well. We'll have worldwide economic collapse. We're going to have nuclear war. And there's going to be millions of jihadists that ransack Jews in Israel on the next version of 10.7. So, since there is no downside and only upside, empowerment, enrichment, enablement, love, emancipation. By embracing the terms and conditions of the covenant, capitalizing on the Moed Mikre that bring us here, now would be a better time than later, particularly since there may not be many tomorrows for you if you don't. So the last chance to come clean, to walk to Yahweh, to inherit the benefits of the covenant, are approaching. Tabua harvest is just 12 months away. And so to encourage Israel to capitalize on this literally once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Shalomo prophetically pronounces that there will be another co-worker in addition to his father, Dod. One who will follow, however, in his father's footsteps. He will be devoted to him, his herald. 40 years shy of 3 millennia from this pronouncement, a Nakri, an observant foreigner, Dod's and Yashayah's Choter, a man from Edom, according to Yashayah, will walk out of the pages of the Torah and of the prophets into the lives of God's people. And in these words, we find the prophecy that was alluded to in Zechariah, which is why we began there. And well, we will return to Zechariah once this is completed. It makes it particularly pertinent to this occasion. Do you recall what Zechariah said that brought us to this, fellas? It's it really is a tough question. If you didn't live this stuff 24 hours a day, which you guys pretty much do, but it would be really hard to recall what it was that Zechariah said that brought us to this prophecy. All right.
Yeah,
what he said was
Jim.
that those who are going to return to him and that are going to benefit from all that God has to say will be those who listen to what the prophets said during the time that Yahweh's house was being set upon its foundations and being built and developed.
Oh, no.
And there were only 3 prophets at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan speaking to Dod about who builds houses and who lives in them and who's going to return as king. 2 Samuel 7, recall that?
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the Yahweh serving as his own prophet, and the Song of Dod, the 89th Mizmor, the most magnificent and important piece of literature ever written. And it's the reason why we did that whole series, the Dod Song, where that was dedicated as the cornerstone of the house bearing Yahweh's name, this covenant, a home called the Temple, on the Temple Mount, and 968 BCE. It is literally the foundation of it. And so he's speaking of paying attention to the prophetic discourse that's in the 89th Mizmor and that is in 2 Samuel 7 about Dod and houses like this and Dod's return as king. But also this, and more this than anything else, because this is the prophet who spoke at the conclusion of building Yahweh's home on the foundation that his father had provided. So we are here because Zechariah, the second to last prophet, told us that if you want to live, if you want to be part of tomorrow, you need to pay very close attention to what the prophets said at the establishment of Yahweh's home on the Temple Mount. So we've gone through Kings and now Chronicles to this point to see what the prophet Solomon had to say. Guys, this is, I'm going to start this. It's a very long series of sentences.
Okay.
They are profoundly important. They're exceedingly detailed. They're robust. You're welcome to interrupt me at any time so I can take a breath as I go through them. And you need to know, Israel, when you listen to this, that there's no one in human history that it can pertain to other than myself. And so when I share this with you, it is with a tremendous sense of humility. I'm not bragging. I would have done anything to have remained anonymous. I wrote for the first 10 years everything that is in these books. Yada Yahowah was Yada was my pen name. I wanted to stay anonymous. It is this passage and the statements regarding the Choter in Yeshaya 11 that ended that, because I had made a commitment that was vastly more important than my own anonymity. And what that was, fellas, we're going to go where the words lead.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
If this is where the words lead, this is where we're going. And this is where the words led. So as you hear these words, you're listening to the fulfillment of this prophecy. I was thinking about that as I delivered this soliloquy on hate as we began this program. I am very cautious every time I turn on these lights. We start this camera, we ignite this microphone, and I speak to you, that I recognize the great responsibility that comes as a result of what follows. And it is a great responsibility, one that I take very seriously, committing every waking hour to this, and I have done that now for 24 years as I speak to you these words. Moreover, this is why, in addition and finally, truly and in conjunction with all of this, regarding someone else, ha-nakri, the observant and discerning, especially responsive foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location who will come to understand this nakri. Pursuant to someone from a different place and culture, speaking a different language, who having paid attention will comprehend and respond. It is from nakar, one who, being attentive and astute, will be acquainted, recognize, and acknowledge something that deserves our highest regard and respect. The nakri, who, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, is not of your people, this Israel. We'll pause there just for a moment. Are you aware of any other place where God makes such a distinction that after telling his people never to emulate the way of the Goyim, he tells his people that someone is coming for you to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, someone who has been observant, responsive, and come to understand, who is not of your people. His ethnicity is not Yisrael, and yet he will live and die for Israel. Literally live and die for Israel. Is there any other place where this is
Say
stated?
avoid him like the plague.
Yeah. But it's not to avoid Goyim like the plague. It's to avoid the ways of the Goyim, their politics, their religion, their conspiracies, their militancy.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you're a Goy that forsakes religion, politics, conspiracy, if you're opposed to these things, then there is no reason for God's people to be wary of you or oppose you.
True.
God only wants his people to avoid the religious, political, patriotic, militant, and conspiratorial ways of the Goyim. Fortunately, Israel has largely emulated them. In fact, Israel has given them their two most popular religions, Christianity and Islam. But if you're a goy and you have said, I want nothing to do, I'm going to actually expose and condemn religion. I'm going to expose and condemn politics. I'm going to expose and condemn conspiracy. And I'm going to be observant of the Word of God, come to understand it, and then share it. Then you are to be embraced according to this statement from Yahweh. So let's read that again, and then we'll go to the next statement. Moreover, this is why, wagam, besides and in addition, finally, truly, and in conjunction with all of this, regarding someone else, he's just been speaking of Yahweh and Dod. Those are the only two people he's spoken of so far. In addition to Yahweh and Dod. Obviously in conjunction with Yahweh and Dod. Because Gam means also, in addition to them. Regarding this other individual, this observant and discerning, especially responsive foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location, who will come to understand the Nakri, who, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, is not of your people, lo men, ata, this Yisrael, you. Wabo. He will come. He will actually arrive at a moment in time. He will come, go, and return. All for the harvest. Call perfect, third person, masculine singular. One of these individuals. He is male. Call, that means take this literally. This is authentic, it's genuine. Perfect, it's going to happen at a point in time. So he will come. He will arrive at a moment in time. He will also come, go, and return from a distant country after a long interval of time. Men eretz rakok. From being alienated to profoundly close in an association in the distant future. For the express purpose of being a witness and of voicing answers. Lama'an. For the sake of an explicit intent of testifying and providing insights in response to this would be Yahweh's, vitally important, gadol, empowering, and tremendously valuable, expansive, growth-enabling Shem. God's name, his proper designation, reputation, and renown. And your influence as your hand, as an effective troubadour for trumpets, a prepared and capable person willing to engage in battle, who is resolute, unwavering, chazak, an empowered person who is proficient, a bit loud, very intense, sometimes even harsh, overtly direct, often overempowering, and always steadfast and firm when devoted to encouraging and restoring. Are you giggling in the background there, Kirk?
No, I had something in my throat. Sorry.
I'm giggling.
No, that was fun.
But it's
right
true.
on the mark.
It's true.
Got your number.
Yeah. When God comes to inspiring the prophets who speak for him, he's got their number. He's really good at this prophecy stuff.
Yeah, boy.
And is your Zeroah, as the one cultivating the seeds for your harvest. Zeroah Ata, the one who is fruitful in his ways, sowing the seeds which take root and grow, while denoting and advancing the purpose of the arm of God, your shepherd, as well as your sacrificial lamb, whom you have extended, whom you have dispatched. There's a lot more to say, but let's go back and just consider this again. So this Nachri, God says he's going to come, he's going to go, he's going to return. He's going to arrive from a distant country after a long interval of time. Well, I'd say 3,000 years would be a reasonably long interview of time. And if you're going to go from Israel, I would say the west coast of America, which is where Yahweh found me, that's a very long way from Israel. So we can check those boxes. For the express purpose of being a witness and voicing answers regarding your vitally important name. Lama'an is a word that speaks of providing a witness, providing answers, being a student who learns and then teaches. And the first thing that I did that I think was of vital importance is that I discovered the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name. Kirk, you were with me back in those days. You remember how I did that?
Yeah. Well, you used the words around it. Like he starts out with Haya. We talked about all the one common words that have always been agreed upon, that shalom and so forth.
Yes.
I mean, that's a pretty good clue.
Yeah, Yahweh begins by saying that his name is based on Haya. Haya explains 3 of the 4 letters in Yahweh's name, Haya. So we know that it's Yah, and we know that the concluding He is also Ah. So that's 3 of the 4 letters. That only leaves 1 to be discerned. And what is the single most repeated word among Jews?
Shalom.
Shalom.
Yeah. Sorry.
And the O sound in Shalom, where does that come from?
It's from the Wah. O-W.
The Wah. It's the Wah. Yeah, the Wah in Hebrew is pronounced either as a O or U. And the overwhelming percentage of the time, about 90% of the time, it's pronounced as O, as in Shalom. The book that Yahweh was revealing to Moshe, where he conveyed that Yahweh is his one and only name for all time, all places, and the only way that he wanted to be remembered is as Yahweh. What is the name of that book?
Torah.
Torah.
Torah. And where do we get the O sound from Torah?
Same place.
Yeah, the same place, the Wah.
Wah.
So I began there, and then I looked at every word used in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. Every single one of them. And I laid them all out with their pronunciation. And based upon this realization, it became very obvious that the Hebrew alphabet was composed of 22 letters, of which 5 are vowels, open mouth sounds, and 17 are consonants. The Yod, the Wah, and the He are all vowels. Yahweh's name is comprised of 4 vowels. And those vowels are pronounced throughout the thousands of words that comprise the Torah and the prophets and the Mizmor Psalms. It wasn't difficult. But it did. I spent 2 weeks at it, and I was very systematic. And I've shared the result in An Introduction to God, Volume 1. I was the first person to correctly deduce the pronunciation of Yahweh's name in 2,500 years, and then proved it. So God started where I started.
You know, I wrote down, while we studied today, I wrote down the things that first encountered after I met you, or not met you, but physically, but after I encountered your book and started reading. And the first thing I wrote down is because it's truth and order, is you did Yahweh's name, which just blew me away. The mitzvah, tablet of stones were really big, high on the list at the time. You already started talking about a timeline of when things would happen. The Moed Mikra, and then later Dode. And those were I got tons, but those were so huge there was no turning back. There's nothing else. There's nowhere to go. This is true, provable, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because I was a big prophecy nut when I met you. You know, I said, wow, this just clued me in on everything. I thought, well, it obviously did. We've got to keep going and keep going and keep going. It's infinite, but wow. And so this speaks to me as much as anything in this thing. Just wow.
Yeah. Kirk, in the process of doing this, I did several things that had never been done before. It's not just explaining that this is the proper pronunciation of Yahweh's name and telling people why. But I invented an entirely different way to present Yahweh's testimony in an amplified translation of bold letters for the core meaning, and then inside of a parenthetical, the Hebrew word in the most generic form so that you can look it up in any one of 20 or 30 different Hebrew English dictionaries or lexicons. So you can validate the accuracy of that translation. No one ever done that before. And if it was complicated, in the next paragraph or in the previous paragraph, I would introduce the word and say, here are your options. This is why I've come to this conclusion. And you could then go through that process to validate it for yourself. No one had ever done that before. And then if I were going to make a claim, like something such as there are 3 destinations for human souls. They can live forever with God in Shamayim. They can exist forever separated from God in Sheol, which is akin to a black hole, reduced to a single dimension, which is time. Or their souls simply cease to exist, so that there is no punishment, no reward for those that don't know God, but didn't take an active role in misleading people away from him or abuse his people.
It's fair, too.
But well, that is a profound insight, and I'm the first person to ever consider it. I'm the only person even now that advocates it. But that's important to have determined something like that, because it's the number one reason why agnostics and atheists push away from God, is they say that the religions that say love me or worship me or whatever, or I'm going to send you to hell. That deity would have to be sadistic, and it's true. If the heaven and hell were the only options, as they are in Christianity and in Islam, but that's not what God said. The vast majority of souls simply cease to exist at the end of their mortal lives. No punishment, no reward. God gave them the gift of life, and they squandered it. There you go. But it's not just that I determined this as the first person in human history to do so 23 years ago. But I proved it. Systematically showed how God has described all 3 of these faiths. And that's true with everything we've come to know about Yahweh. For example, Rabbinic Judaism celebrates Pesach for 7 days, and they call Pesach the day they were liberated from Egypt. But that's not true.
No, never got out.
Matzah is the celebration of 7 days. Pesach is just the first day of Matzah, and it is on Matzah that you're separated from the constraints of religion and politics, where on Passover, it's about extending your life, but it's having a really lovely meal, and they didn't leave Mitzrayim on Passover. They left Mitzrayim, crucibles of human religious and political oppression, on Matzah. But it's one thing to determine that, and that's profound. It's another thing to prove it. And to have these books here, which are a written testament to the evidence, to support thousands of profound insights along the way. I think the greatest discovery in human history is the realization that David is not only the Son of God, the Messiah, that he is our returning king, and that he foretold that he would arrive in Jerusalem during Chakmah to fulfill Chakmah 700 years before he did so, right to the correct week. And speaking with Daniel, as Gabriel, God's most courageous and compassionate man. But that he described how he would die, his body would die, on Passover by providing a vivid depiction of not only of crucifixion and being nailed to that upright post that the Romans used to crucify, but he described in medical terms how crucifixion kills 700 years before crucifixion existed, 600 years before Rome even existed. And in that same testimony, he explains the importance of matzah and that matzah is more important even than Pesach and what he did for us on matzah. So understanding that Dowd is the Son of God that Christians ripped off, and he's the Messiah that Christians ripped off, and that he is the returning king that Christians ripped off, and that Jews ignored, but that he is our Savior. He's the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. The combination of those things is the single greatest discovery in human history, and it proves that there was no Jesus, that Jesus is nothing but a product of identity theft and a crude counterfeit. But I'll just say it. I got the 5 books of Twistianity that prove every aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the 3, soon to be 4 volumes of Coming Home that prove every aspect of it. And the 3 volumes of the Moed Mikre that demonstrate every aspect of that is true. It's just one thing to say it, and it's the most important discovery of human history. It's another thing to prove it, and then to let all of your proof be available to the entire world for free. This is the gift that God is providing through this Nakri. So it isn't just that he would be a witness and that he would witness to providing answers regarding God's vitally important Shem, his name, and that he would serve as God's hand, projecting God's influence at this time. That he would be a troubadour on trumpets, because Teruah, trumpets, is the day of the herald when the Nakri actually lays down his life as the Adamah Parah, this bloody red man of the earth, in the guise of the red heifer, to save Israel. That will battle even in the swamp of anti-Semitism, Israel's foes, to save Israel so that, and protect Israel so that there is a remnant of Israel that can be called home. And as we found from Chazak is right on the money. I mean, I'm not only the troubadour of trumpets, the day of the herald of Teruah, but I am prepared. I've put in 24 years in preparation for this YAHOWAH blog. Yes. Providing all of these books behind me as evidence to everything we're talking about. And I am engaged in this battle. I do my time in the anti-Semitic swamp and cesspool of X. And I support the Covenant family on Facebook. And we broadcast multiple times a day on YouTube. And yes, YAHOWAH has empowered me. He's made me proficient. Collectively, we are a bit loud, but you can never accuse YAHOWAH of whispering. Not his style.
No.
God loves those who are very intense. God is very harsh. And you have to be harsh to be loving. And so am I. God is right down in front of you. It says what is true, is bold and blunt, overly direct, even overpowering at times. That's why the children of Israel said, "Oh, go away, shut up, we can't deal with you anymore. You are way too direct and too overpowering." Well, God's not going to change. And the person that's going to represent him is not going to change. Those are just traits that we should expect, but also devoted to encouraging and restoring God's people. Perhaps the most important term that God applies to this role and to the role of his beloved Son and even to the man who shepherded the flock through the wilderness to get to the promised land is Zeroah. There are 3 of them. And the 3 are all well identified. This one is one of many times that it is identified with me. I'm different than the other 2. The first Zeroah, as the arm of God wrote down God's directions. Dode, as the sacrificial lamb of God, carried them out. My job is to cultivate the seeds that they have sown, because there are 2 harvests that remain. And my job is to manage those harvests, to cultivate the most productive outcome that is possible. That is why we devote every waking hour to this. This is why we're all so committed to it. We're here for a productive harvest. Shabuah, 22 May, 2026. Towrah, 23 September, 2033. The last 2 off-ramps. And it is the Zeroah that is the guide to them. It's my responsibility. And I can't do it alone. That's why we have a team that supports what we're doing. But God is speaking, and his Nakri is the final Zeroah, whom God himself has extended. If you think God can do better, well, I don't blame you. But the fact of the matter is, I'm his choice, and he has extended me to you. And arguing with God and saying, I think you could have made a better choice is just about as worthwhile as arguing with Yahowah when he said that I chose Dode. He is my chosen one. And my reasons for choosing him are just different than yours. So you're going to have to live with that. I'm going to tell you all the reasons that I chose to love him. It's going to become obvious if you study his life and his lyrics and what I have to say about him. If you read what I wrote about him in the 89th Mizmor, you'll get it, why I chose him, why I love him, why we are father and son. And when I don't claim to be anywhere near Dode, he is the sun, I am but the moon. And while he is the king and I am simply his herald, the fact of the matter is, like everyone who has a role in God's story, we were chosen by him. Now, we still have free will. We could have said no. Most of us began with no. Are you kidding? I don't want to do that. Yeah, it's pretty persistent, though. He is pretty good at letting us work ourselves into the situation that he would have
I
us
remember you were talking about anonymity earlier. I remember so long ago that the Nakri, and you're like, it couldn't be, it is, but who else could it be? It's got, and so you kind of grow into the acceptance of, okay, the Nakri, I can do this, and then a little later on, and Choter, okay, and a little later on, okay, who are the 3 to Zeroah, and then, okay, this is getting serious now, and then Adam Parah, and it's like, hold on,
hold on there.
Signed up for that, right?
Yeah. But that was 22 years into the experience.
Mm-hmm.
If that had been the first, hello, I want you to be the Adam Parah. That is the red heifer. He's slaughtered, and not just slaughtered. He's beaten to death by the corporeal manifestation of Satan, who really hates your guts. It's going to make quite the spectacle of savagely beating you to death, and it's going to be in front of the whole world. It's going to be on the Temple Mount. But not to worry. I've got the great funeral set up for you. Eliah's going to officiate it. I'm going to light the fires. I'm going to release the waters. We're going to bring all the remnant of Israel into Jerusalem so they can all witness this. It's going to be the greatest show on earth. You're just going to love it. So what was that part again about?
Wait a minute. Go back.
Being sacrificed and beaten to death by Satan? Mm-hmm. You want to run that by me again? Why didn't you tell me that at the beginning?
No, don't leave with that.
Yes, we grow in our relationship with God.
Yeah.
As a parent, I was a sea captain. I was an airline transport pilot. And I was an entrepreneur that took 3 businesses public. When my children were 5 years old, I didn't spend much time teaching them how to fly, nor how to
Right.
chart the seas,
Mm-hmm.
or how to fund and run a business. It was way beyond where they were at the time.
Right.
Yahowah and I began simply. And he says, we're going to work together. We're going to learn to trust one another. We're going to grow together. And eventually I'm going to layer on one bit of understanding after another until you reach a point where you've been the first person now to put the whole picture together, and you will see yourself in this picture, the roles that you play. And then we're going to turn on the cameras and we're going to take advantage of something that didn't even exist when you started. And you're going to share this message, my son's message, with the whole world. You grow into the role. God gets you what you need to make it happen.
Absolutely.
And there's even times where you read where even the greatest among Yahowah's prophets failed. And Bamidbar, Numbers 11.
Mm-hmm.
It's riveting. Moshe had a meltdown. He gave up. He says, I can't do it. And I'm reading these words and I realize I'm not going to let that happen to me. I don't care what is thrown in my way. We're going to see this through. We're going to get this done. We're going to get to the finish line. Yahowah deserves it. Dode deserves it. God's people deserve it. We're going to see this thing through. I realize it's a tough audience, but we're going to get every day with a smile, and we're going to go right back at it. And that's the attitude you got to take.
Mm-hmm.
And you get your batteries charged because, well, I can tell you, fellas, that I did talk radio for 5 years on a syndicated program called Shattering Myths, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, and I've done blogs for almost 20 years, and I did 10,000 talk radio interviews on every syndicated talk radio show on earth. For the first 5 years, I did this 10,000 hours. People writing about my interviews on Coast to Coast. I was the first person ever to do 3 hours on Coast to Coast 3 different times. And one of the things that is true about all of that is I could not listen to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Never was able to listen to a single recorded show. I didn't like the sound of my voice. I didn't like my delivery. I just was uncomfortable with what I was. I didn't think I was effective. I didn't think I was good enough. But when Yahowah said, I want you to go one step further, you're now going to set up studios in your home. You're going to buy the best cameras, lighting systems, the best microphones, servers, computers. You're going to learn how to do a vlog, young man, and we're going to have the Yahowah blog. And now I do this 2 and 3 times a day, all live streamed. There are no edits of any kind. What you see is what I'm delivering. We're doing this raw. And every night, sometime around 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'll sit down in front of a television in the living room, and I'll turn on the 2 or 3 shows we did that day. And not only can I watch them, I'm mesmerized by them. I'm saying, this is really good. It's genuine. It's real. The message is powerful. The information is unlike anything that anyone has ever shared with God's people before.
That's fascinating.
And the same guy, when he was younger, quicker, smarter, more articulate, that I couldn't listen to, that's become this person that I think is creating the most insightful, powerful, transformative blogs in the world today didn't happen independently. When Yahowah asked me to do it, he said, we will do it together. And we have. And it's powerful, transformative, empowering, emancipating, enriching on the single most important subject in the universe: how to survive this life, be part of God's family, to live forevermore, to be enriched and empowered by God, inheriting all that he has to give. Nothing more important. And gentlemen, there are thousands and thousands of things that I've learned and that we have freely offered and shared that no one has ever spoken before. I said the other day that I have learned more and understand more and have shared more that is pertinent to Yahowah and forming a relationship with him than all of the rabbis throughout history combined.
No question.
This continues. When he arrives on the scene and he chooses to pursue this, coming, going, and returning, then unaffected by societal, political, or religious influence, independently, he will help interested parties reconcile their relationship by providing those who are interested and who exercise good judgment with the requested information and justifications to make reasoned decisions pursuant to intervention, even serving as an intercessor while independently judging others regarding his familial relationship and family home. That's the conclusion of Dabarim Ha-Yomem, Words of the Days, 2 Chronicles 6:32. So after introducing the Zeroah, the one cultivating the harvest, and describing the personality that is speaking to you as bold and overpowering, sometimes harsh, but deeply compassionate, that God has extended, he says that when he arrives on the scene and chooses to pursue this, coming, going, returning, that he's going to be unique, because in this world, 99% of people are affected by societal, political, and religious influences. Some are all of those things. And to be independent of them puts you in, 1 in a million. And to go beyond that, to be independent of all of that and still be engaged so that you're helping to reconcile the relationship between God and man, his people, and Yahowah, by providing those who exercise good judgment with the information they need to make reasoned decisions. That's not only important, but unique. Again, unheralded in the entire human experience that somebody would do that. Because you want to be popular today, if you want to gain an audience, you're going to speak on behalf of a religion or a political platform or a societal niche. But if you're opposed to all of those things, it is really tough to get a word in edgewise on any of the platforms that are designed to convey this kind of a message. And that is yet who we are. And we're all focused on this familiar relationship and family home. El Ha Be'eth Hazeth. It's all about the covenant. It's all about God's family. Well, this is how Shlomo has addressed that the divisions between God and his people will be resolved. His father's herald, as the final Zeroah, would come at long last to restore the relationship with Yahweh. And because of the Nakri, this observant foreigner who functions as a Zeroah, one cultivating the seeds of the harvest, he is serving as Kol, the voice of God, in advance of Yahweh's return. Now, from this prophetic pronouncement, we know that Gam, beyond all of this, that surely there would be someone else, a Nakri, an observant foreigner who would be discerning and responsible, who will Asher show the way to the benefits of the relationship, that he's going to be a goy. Allah, men, ata Yisrael, not be among your people, when addressing Yisrael. And yet he is totally and completely devoted to Israel. In fact, he defines what Israel means, to engage and endure with God. Well, that's pretty astonishing in its own right, because this is the only time in the prophets, in the Torah, or in the writings that Yahweh distinguishes a foreigner in this way. Now, because it is so exceptional, after 3 affirmations that the Nakri is a foreigner and not a Israelite, God adds a 4th, telling his people that he is going to come from an Eretz Rakok, a distant time and place. He will even transition from being alienated, like the rest of Israel, to being integrated in a profound way. There is even the inference with that the Nakri will arrive, leave, Shabuah, and then return as one of the 2 witnesses in 2030, which is exactly what's going to occur. Now, as a former Christian who had disavowed the religion, I was called on Towrah, and I'm going to serve until Shabuah, when I will leave, but I'm going to return in advance of the final harvest of Towrah to serve Israel in all of these ways. And therefore, there is one person in human history to which all of this could apply. And of course, that's where it gets particularly interesting, because the Nakri is slated to do what I alone have done: reintroduce Yisrael to Ha Gadol Shem, the exceedingly important, tremendously valuable, and empowering nature of Yahweh's personal and proper name. That has been my Lama'an, primary purpose as a witness. It is the explicit intent of these books, all of which are written under the name Yada Yahowah. God deploys those who work with him as an extension of his Yad hand, as a way to extend his influence. And while that is fairly common, Ha-Chazak is not. It speaks of someone who is resolutely determined, prepared, and ready to engage, who is particularly unwavering, and who can be influential, who is an empowered individual whom God finds remarkably competent and capable. At least he makes him come across that way. And of course, he is a bit loud, intense, sometimes harsh, typically direct, often overpowering, always steadfast, noted for being firm, especially when encouraging and restoring God's people. With Ha-Shazak, he is the one directly associated with the responsibility of being the troubadour for trumpets, and therefore the herald of Towrah. And this conclusion comes with a pair of important insights. First, Isaiah 17, when addressing this same Zeroah, one cultivating the Towrah ingathering, the prophet reveals that he will be as forceful and as protective as a stick when lashing out this time, as an unrelenting, sharp, rocky crag, and as strong as a bull when protecting the mortal remnant of Yisrael. These are traits that Yahweh has instilled and will display. Second, after Yahweh states in Yirmiyah 31 that he drew the children of Israel out of being persecuted, of them being abused in Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious oppression, with a chazak hand, he notes that the final exodus, this one from Babel, and the intermixing of truth and lies to confound would be different from the initial exodus from Mitzrayim, the crucibles of religious and political oppression, because he wouldn't be this chazak overbearing next time. Because he's out of here. He says, I'm leaving it to the Nakri. It's his responsibility now to be unrelenting prior to God's return. And in this realization, should be noted that Dod was also called Shazak. Since Israel said, we don't want to hear from you again, we'd want to see you again, best thing that God can do is represent himself through persona with attributes that convey his nature. Chazak is in Yahweh's nature. He's a father with a firm hand. The Nakri observant foreigner is one of three Zeroah. This is a title that is afforded to Moshe, Dod, and to Yada. And in this Lama'an witness case, the final Zeroah, the one cultivating the seeds sown for Yahweh's harvest, Shabu and Towrah, this is the purpose for which he has been Nata extended. Well, in this context, we're reminded that the Nakri will arrive on the scene to pursue these things, coming, going, and returning as we cycle through the Moedim, particularly prior to the return of our King. In a time when 99% of people are swayed by societal customs, politics, religion, conspiracy, and patriotism, he's going to be the outlier who is unaffected by these things. The very things that define the lives and the thinking of others. But that does not mean that he will be disengaged. On the contrary, he's going to independently help interested parties reconcile their relationship with Yahweh, doing so by providing those who are interested with the information they need to exercise good judgment, make reasoned decisions pursuant to his intervention. Now, Solomon's follow-on pronouncement is equally identifying, fellows, and it is riveting. It's pertinent to our time. He tells Israelis living at this moment the following. When you hear this, as if coming out of the heavens of the sky, listen to what comes from the spiritual realm. Wa'ata shama min ha-shamaim. You should continually listen to what is out of the heavens from the cloud, within the location where you live, no matter where you are, from your dwelling place, so that you are properly established and endure in your life. Then engage and act accordingly, doing everything which to show the way, the Nakri, this observant and responsive foreigner from a different ethnicity and geographic location who understands, has proclaimed, inviting you to read and then summoning you. He calls out to you to meet, announcing to you by reading out loud and reciting the pronouncement for you to be called out for the express purpose of serving as a witness, a teacher who provides answers such that all people of the earth will have a genuine and ongoing opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, to acknowledge, to accept, and to understand your name. Coming to respect and revere what pertains to you simultaneously along with your people, Israel. And also so that they may know, acknowledge, accept, and appreciate Yada. Because truthfully, for your name, for your Shem, he is designated and called, he is invited and welcomed, he is summoned to read and to recite about what has been written concerning the house and the family, which to reveal the correct path to walk, to give life meaning, I have built. Dabarim ha yomel.
I was just going to say, in the context of who's saying this and what time he's saying it in, this is the most phenomenal thing. I mean, this is Solomon. It's like a while back when he says, when you return, they were all there. I mean, they must have anybody who really listened must have shook their head saying, huh? But wow.
Well, it's one of thousands.
I know, but
of historic events
yeah.
that Yahweh shares with us that the audience at the time had absolutely no concept whatsoever.
Yeah.
If you look at what I'm translating now, Numbers 11, Moshe didn't understand it. Children of Israel didn't understand it. Yosha ben Nun, his successor, did not understand it. It was for us to understand. God is expert at using a historical narrative to provide a prophetic teaching that is pertinent when it is finally time to understand it. That time is now. We do. And I go through this. You heard all the times that I had to pause. It's very difficult to read this. God is expecting a lot of us. He's trying to achieve a great deal through us, and he wants his people to listen to us. And they're not going to listen unless we are thoughtful, intelligent, prepared, educated, reasonable, rational, consistent, bold. We have to be all of those things. Which is why, the spirit that Yahweh gave to the Choter, the spirit of Yahweh, so that you could speak for him, the spirit of Yahweh. That way you could actually be the mouth, the pay, the pole of Yahweh. That's where it starts, the spirit of Yahweh. And then the spirit of Chakmah, of intelligence, of wisdom, of being able to discern profound truths by analyzing the evidence of Chakmah. And then the next is the spirit of Bien. I think that one of the most empowering words in all of human history. Bien is to make the connections between what is known so that you can go from knowing, which is incredibly powerful. Knowing is so much more valuable than faith. And most people are trapped in faiths, I believe. And to know is vastly superior than believing. But there's something vastly, infinitely more powerful than knowing. And that is what distinguishes this Nakri and the Choter, because he's been given Yahweh's spirit of understanding, of making the connections to comprehend. And God said he's been given the spirit of Etzah, this ability to provide counsel on the entire picture from beginning to end. Something that no one else has put together and presented in its entirety. From being expelled from the garden and all of the things that Yahweh achieved and wanted to exemplify in the garden, to us 6,000 years being invited back to the garden as the whole earth is transformed into it we see the fulfillment of Sukkah.
Yeah.
And then the spirit of Gabora, of impassioned oratory, of character, of being bold, empowered, strong, capable. Something that is essential if you're going to go against the hard heads and stiff necks of God's people. They're obstinate. You better be bold. And God has provided the same spirit that he valued and prized and endowed, the spirit of Gabor, being bold and courageous, a fighter, strong. And he says he also gave the spirit of Diyat, of knowing, of being aware of the evidence. I mean, to be able to do this job, you've had to search Yahweh's testimony for a score of years or more and build up a base of knowledge. And it's from that knowledge, then you're able to process it to go the next step. And so there's this enormous knowledge base that enables us to turn on the lights and camera and speak directly to God's people, because we not only know it of what we speak, we understand it. And then the concluding spirit that the Choter was given is the spirit of respect and reverence for Yahweh. It's why we do this. We love God and we want to achieve for him what he once achieved. We do it to please our Maker. I don't think there's much more we can do in life than show our respect to Yahweh and do our utmost to achieve what he once accomplished. And what he once accomplished at this time is to get through to his stubborn, hard-headed people that they need to shub. They need to return to him so he can return to them and he can save them from themselves. And so that they can recognize his name, his desire to have a familiar relationship with them, to be their father, and for them to recognize what Dode has done in this regard to facilitate this relationship and their restoration and reconciliation, such that he will return as their king. This is what we have been empowered and enabled and equipped to do. So, gentlemen, I don't know how to end on anything more profound than
A good one.
Chronicles 6:33. I'll read it one last time, and we'll say good night and give Yahweh the last word in this case. When you hear this, as if it were coming out of the heavens, like from a cloud, through satellite internet,
Amazing.
listen to what comes from the spiritual realm. Within the location where you live, no matter where you are, then engage and act accordingly, doing everything, which to show the way, the Nakri, this observant and responsive foreigner, from a different ethnicity and geographic location, who understands, has proclaimed and invited you to read, summoning you for the express purpose of serving as a witness, as a teacher who provides answers such that all of the peoples of the earth will have a genuine and ongoing opportunity to become familiar with Yada, to know, acknowledge, accept, and understand your name. Coming to respect and revere everything that pertains to you, doing so simultaneously with your people, Israel, and also so that they may know, acknowledge, and accept and appreciate Yada. Yahweh is very big into sharing credit. You know, we are such small creatures compared to our God, and yet twice here he has closed here and say, I want my people to know you. I want my people to acknowledge and appreciate Yada. That's just so magnanimous of God to share credit. We don't do it for credit, but it is in a father's nature to be proud of what his sons and daughters are achieving when they're working with him. Because truthfully, for your name, he is dedicated and called. He is invited and welcomed. Kara, he is summoned and asked to read aloud and recite what has been written concerning the house and family, which to reveal the correct path to walk, to give life meaning, I have built. It's the most pertinent, most powerful, most exacting prophecy maybe ever issued for our time. And it was at the commencement of literally the dedication sermon for the house of Yahweh's name by the man who was called the wisest of all time, the very son of our great king, Dowd. The first and most important Sermon on the Mount. And this is the crescendo of that presentation, the single most important part of it. Well, thank you. It's been a emotional show, a cerebral show. It's been a bold proclamation of profound truths. We care deeply about Yahweh, his beautiful Shem, his wonderful people and his nation, his place, his son. And we are committed to their restoration. It is what we do every day. It is why we're here. It is why we love what we do. And we will prevail. So thank you. Happy Shabbat to one and all. Gentlemen, Kevin, Burke, thank you so much for being part of this. And I want to thank my wife for that marvelous song that speaks so powerfully to this time.
Very good.
Where it is the only way to properly protect God's people in a world that has come crashing down upon them. Yep. Thank you. Good night. Happy
Good night.
Shabbat.
Shalom, y'all. Night, Kevin.
Hey, Kurt. Shabbat shalom.